So, hyphen. I bet
Yes.
you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean. Does that mean anything to you?
No matter how fat I get, I will always feel small next to the ocean.
Somehow you will never be fat, and that irritates me to no end. When you have the choice to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance.
Okay, so this is also a song that I don't know, shockingly, because I believe that the Venn diagram between our musical tastes, the overlap is actually 0.
No, I think I'll come up with one. So I'm guessing you're not a fan of Leanne Womack or like 1990s country music.
I'm sorry. Do I look white to you?
I don't know what you look, but
It's not white.
It doesn't have to be a racial thing. I listen to almost exclusively black music except for country. And 80s soft rock. Although there's a lot of Al Jarreau in there and whatever. Okay, hold on. I will come up with something recorded by someone. Oh, okay. And I'm not going to sing this one because I am not going to embarrass myself to this point. I want a man with a slow hand. I want a lover with an easy touch. I want somebody who will spend some time, not come and go in it. It's the Pointer Sisters, you traitor to your race.
I thought you weren't going to sing it.
How could you not? Okay, look, you cannot. There is a law somewhere on a book, somewhere in a book, in a shelf in a Library of Congress or something that says you may not speak the Pointer Sisters. They are basically word of the gospel of our Lord somebody, and they're amazing. And how do you know this? Do you not know this song? Okay, so it's called Slow Hand. It's a really good song. You should know it. How do you not know this? You accuse me of being like, far too white because of Leanne Womack, who is far too white. And then you accuse me of then you don't know. Do you know any Pointer Sister songs?
No, I think we're in the wrong decade.
Oh no. This isn't a race thing. This is an age thing.
Yes, correct.
The Pointer Sisters were not born yet when your musical taste peaked. Damn it. Okay. So let's see if you can figure out the subject of this episode. Because first I'm talking about when you're given the choice to sit it out or dance, right? That whole song was an enlightening thing about go take some chance, go live a little, have a little bit of fun, dance, for fuck's sake. And then the other one is moving slowly. Let me do it this way. Let me ask you a question.
Just like a fast car slow or a slow car fast thing?
Kind of. Let me ask you something. If you are on a date, a romantical dinner evening date at a restaurant within 6 feet of someone, which, as if that's ever going to happen again. A, because you're old, and B, because of COVID. And at the conclusion of the dinner portion of this romantical date, you, how do I say this? Things develop in a sort of certain way, and you have an enjoyable experience that lasts precisely 2.5 seconds. What's your take on that?
It was... disappointing?
Okay. All right. So this is the opposite of the slow hand, which was a song about I want a lover with an easy touch. I want somebody who can spend some time, not come and go in a heated rush, whatever. So you think that there is probably some sort of happy medium between 2.5 seconds and say something longer than 2.5 seconds for an activity that's enjoyable.
Yes.
Okay. I here have the latest issue of Car and Driver, which just arrived yesterday, and no affiliation with Car and Driver or anything. I just happened to see this. They have tested this hideous green monstrosity thing called the BMW M8 competition, which I find ironic because anything that weighs 4,251 pounds and seats 2 people and is not a Bugatti Veyron should not have the word competition on it. However, it does 0 to 60 in, would you like to guess how many seconds? Hint.
3.4.
That would be really fast, right? but I gave you the number a second ago.
2.5?
Yeah. Like 2.5 to 60. For an automatic transmission, 4.4 liter V8, 40, what did I say? 4251 pound all-wheel drive barge.
Holy hell.
2.5, right. That is, by the way, the Ferrari 488 Pista. So the car driver does these little spider graph things. And they actually included the 710 horsepower Ferrari 488 Pista on there because this thing is that fast. That is pink. That is 2.7. So this barge of an M8 does 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, which I say is too fast.
That's very curmudgeonly of you.
In my day, fast was 6 seconds. Then, okay, hold on. While I'm being curmudgeonly, let me just also be page-turningly annoying. And I'm going to go to another thing. So this whole issue has like a theme with the Save the Manuals thing, which Car Driver is the one that kind of created that. And they do, if I could find it, a road test of the new 992 Carrera S 7-speed manual, which I very much applaud. So they do this whole thing on Save the Manuals and whatever, and they do like a whole speech on how manuals are great. This is the Leanne Womack, I hope you dance, right? I think of the driving a manual transmission as a dance. You could walk across the parking lot, or you could dance across the parking lot, and dancing is more fun. So they have all these infographics and charts and whatever else about the, what cars are available with a manual and whatever. Do you know the difference in 0 to 60 between a Carrera S with a PDK and a Carrera S with a manual?
0.8 of a second.
That's absurd. I mean, so let me just put it this way. The Carrera S with a manual does 0 to 60 in 3.6, which is probably somewhere around what your GT3 Touring does, right? That's like
I think it's ever so slightly faster.
Yeah,
but
3.4.
it depends who you ask.
No. 3.6, which is 7/10. You were actually pretty
Quite close.
Yeah, damn it. 7/10 of a second off of 0 to 60. To which I say,
I mean, I completely agree, obviously, but it's no shock given my curmudgeonly brand. But I mean, I don't know. The Pista was I drove a Pista yesterday, and it was. I don't know. I don't think I need 2.5 seconds. I don't need 2.7 seconds either. I will say that I ran out of gear. Like, they just has so much oomph and so much torque and so much thrust that you're out. You're constantly in red line.
Torque, and thrust. Are we still talking about the car, or are you talking about your after date enjoying activities? Wow, that's gonna get you really laid. Everyone watching this is gonna want to say, "Oh, as soon as you eat, you go to sleep." Great, thanks. Yeah, I drove the Pista in Italy in prototype form, actually, and I think it was the first time that I'd driven a Ferrari that I said it was just too fast. It's not. It's good. I mean,
when you say fast, you mean like acceleratively, like it accelerates too quickly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think the general sentiment that I have when I drive any contemporary Ferrari, which to me is like sort of FF and 458 onward, is that by the time that I'm entertained, the cars are so good at masking speed that by the time that I'm entertained and I look down, I'm like, oh my God, this is like deeply unsafe for my driving license. And so, I mean, I don't know, it depends on why. We've talked about this at length, but the reason why I drive is because I want to have some kind of interesting, exciting experience. And if by the time that I'm having that, I'm going 100, some number of miles an hour, that's very large, then
but
the
you
car...
would never do on a public road, of course.
Yeah, then it's not the car for me. But everybody buys these cars for different reasons. I mean...
I'm trying to understand why they buy them, though. And if you went from date to the maternity ward in 3.5 seconds, would the activities involved in getting to the maternity ward be as enjoyable? No. Good things come to those who wait. There's an enjoyment. I hope you dance. I mean, I just keep coming back. So this whole thing was actually spurred, but yesterday I saw your Instagram story about the Pista, and I was curious to see what you thought about it. And I want to talk more about that because there's more to it, to that car than just speed. But I have an Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio at the moment. And
A press car
press
from
car.
Alpha?
Yeah, a press car from Alpha. And I
Haven't you had 1 or 3 of those before?
Not since the launch. So they've done an update. They did an interior, like an infotainment update. And
The shifter looks less shitty.
The shifter looks less shitty, and I was told the brakes would feel less shitty. That is unfortunately not the case. It is actually impossible to stop this
Does it
car.
have ceramic brakes or
No.
steel brakes?
Non-ceramic, just regular steel brakes, but it's brake-by-wire, and they just flat out got the programming wrong. It is genuinely impossible to come to a smooth stop. If you, as you normally, your rate of deceleration is sort of constant, and as you're about to come to a stop, if you don't gradually release the pedal, which we all kind of do intuitively, you come to a stop, and then everyone's heads go back. So as you're coming off the brake pedal on this car, it doesn't release normally and linearly. And as it starts to release, then the torque converter, it throws itself in first and then unclutches. And so you get this lurch forward, and then you have to really hit the brakes hard again. And so every time you come to a stop is a head toss for both you and your passengers. And you can actually, it's even easier to come to a smooth stop with start-stop active. Like if the engine's off, you can do it better, because if the engine's running, it does that secondary first gear lurch thing. I just want to ask the people who tune this car, did you drive it? Did you ever drive it? I'm sure it's
so the car is the
wonderful on
same.
track. Car's the same. I love it. I adore it. I mean, but that's idiotic that they can't get, that it's impossible to come to a smooth stop. That should be one of the first things.
If you're complaining about so in flying, this is called a regime of flight, which would be like takeoff or landing or cruise or whatever. If you're complaining about a regime of flight related to coming to a smooth stop, that means there's nothing else to complain about if the rest of the car is that good.
Okay, I can complain about some other stuff. In fact, I'm going to. All right. So there's a double-edged sword in the way this engine was designed. So first of all, it is.
I agree with this. The engine was a disappointment for me in some regards, even though I really like the car overall.
What about the engine?
I don't like the fact that there's no auditory cues for red line, and so I kept running into the rev limiter because the timbre of the engine never changes. And so I felt like an idiot because I was like, oh, there's the rev limiter again, which I never do in a car because normally I'm very sympathetic mechanically, and things start to sound uncomfortable, and so I'll be like, oh, it's time to shift, even if I'm 1500 RPM short of red line. In the GT3, it's constantly just wow, I still have 2000 RPM to go, and I shifted at 7000, and there's never any risk of running into the rev limiter in the GT3 because the experience tells you what's happening, whereas with the Alpha, nothing really changes auditorily. And I guess what that tells me is that I typically decide when to shift based on auditory cues.
I think most people do.
Unless you're just trying to go absolutely flat out on a racetrack, but in normal sort of Swift Canyon driving or around town driving, you shift based on auditory cues, and so that kept happening to me.
Yeah. One of the things that I like the most about the GT3 is not only does the pitch of the engine change dramatically with RPM, so it starts to get higher and higher and higher pitch, but in that last 1000 RPM from 8000 to 9000, the tone of the engine changes completely. I don't know what's happening. It's probably a timing thing or something, but it goes from sounding
VTEC just kicked in.
Yeah, it's kind of what it almost sounds that way, right? It goes from sounding angry and purposeful and screaming to you better get the fuck out of my way. It gets really, really pissed off, and that's your sign. You're in the home stretch, but it also screaming higher and higher and higher in pitch. The Alpha motor doesn't do that at all. The Alpha motor at 7,000 RPM, the first time I drove it, I was merging onto the highway with, it was a mile into a drive, so a fairly cold engine, and typically I'm very sympathetic to cold engines. I hit the rev limiter at 7,000 thinking I was at 3. At 7,000, that engine does sound like it's at 3.5. And that's the biggest disappointment from that, especially comparing it to previous Alfa Romeos with Bussos and all their other V6s. They're very talkative and they're very high-pitched and sonorous.
There's a journey. Every trip to the red line is a journey that has like a distinctive character, and that's not what happens with that motor.
So, and it sounds like the two banks of 3 cylinders are not connected to each other. So you don't get the 6-cylinder sound. You don't get a 6-cylinder at 7,000 RPM sound. You get a 3-cylinder at 7,000 or a 6-cylinder at 3,500 kind of a sound. The double-edged, so the reason I said it's double-edged sword is because there's a very big positive to that, which is that in combination with very, very ridiculously, stupidly, oh my God, amazingly short gear ratios, you're constantly revving the shit out of this engine. I am very proud to announce that in the first 40 miles of normal driving, quote unquote normal, I got 9.9 miles per gallon out of this Quadrifoglio. I consider that an achievement for a modern car. But it's because I'm just
especially
revving
at 2.9.
Yeah, it's a little. I mean, it's not even like a big. There's no 6-liter V8 that would have used more gas, and it's mostly because I just revved the shit out of it, not realizing that every time I look down, I'm like, ooh, 3.5, ooh, $4,000. But that means also you're in a part of the rev range where turbo lag is minimized. So it's got this great responses. It's got power all the time. It feels alive. But it's a really strange engine because it's a 90-degree V6 without balance shafts. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know of any others. I'm sure there are others in production. But that should be horribly rough and coarse, and it isn't. In fact, it's one of the smoothest V6s I know of. And I'll insert a video here. Damn it with these inserts. I'll insert a video here, but the engine mounts on the car are so soft that when you slam the door, if you have the hood open, you watch the engine go like it's basically mounted on like Jello. So we put it with the hood open, put it in gear, and just gave it a little bit of gas, and you can watch the thing rock over like 2 inches. It's all right. Watch the video now. Okay, you don't know what I mean, but the people who are watching know what I mean. But that really soft engine mounting is what makes this, what should be rough engine, very, very smooth. And also...
Appear smooth.
What smooth?
Appear smooth.
Appear smooth, yeah. And it is a big bore, short stroke Ferrari engine. But it's an interesting thing. However, despite all of its magic, I tend to never rev it over $3,000 or $4,000. I mean, I'm there all the time, but I don't go any higher because it's just too fast. I did a backroad blast in this car that I do in all other cars, and the speeds that this thing carries and the ease with which it carries it because of the super quick steering, and it's super quick and it's super light. So you're just like, corner, and there's no body roll. It's got ridiculous roll stiffness to the point where it got stuck in my driveway, as per usual. I guess I'm gonna have to put a video of that in too. Damn it. Guess it's not fixed. You knew it too, right? You're like...
But as soon the car can extract itself from that.
Kind of. So that video was with me. I turned into my driveway. I wasn't trying to get the car stuck. So I turned into my driveway and I go in at an angle so nothing scrapes, and the car just failed to proceed. It stopped. And then you just hear wow, 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 with the back wheels spinning. And the only way I could get it to continue up the hill was to give a lot of gas. Not a tremendous amount of gas, but a huge amount of wheel spin. And it took, smoke pouring off the tire, not pouring, smoke being developed and clattering of traction control and stability control to finally get me into my driveway. And this happened a couple of years ago. I posted a video of the first year Quadrifoglio. And I just kind of thought my driveway just pisses it off. But the first day I had this car, I went over to my friends for dinner and got stuck going in their driveway. And I got up the driveway eventually, but I left a huge black streak mark. Not on my pants, but in the driveway. So it's a little bit curious for a car that has a torque vectoring electronically controlled differential and traction control that it'll allow so much wheel spin at low speeds.
You need a locking differential.
It does have. I mean, that's what a torque vectoring diff does. It could send 100% of the power to the
It
wheel
has
that
100% lock?
it probably do. Typically, they till about 1,100 pound-feet of torque. They're 100% lockers. Those torque vectoring diffs. So there's no reason. There's no technical reason for this. It's just a software programming issue. But the reality is the diff in that car is strange anyway. Like the car will step out. It's very assy. It does step out a lot under power. And then it's not really easy to manage. So it tends to be abrupt, like it'll, start to step out and then kind of pull itself back, and it does this weird cyclical thing. I don't trust it enough to do big drifts on public roads, for example. If there's anything to hit, or if I could really screw anything up and hit a curb, I'm not going to try it. Which reflects what I remember when we drove the car on track. Randy Popst and I both had a really hard time drifting that for camera, where the Euro cars were easy, but the US cars, there's still traction control is still making weird noises and grabbing wheels occasionally, and just wasn't trustworthy. I'm sure that's fixable with programming, but still, I think the best sports sedan on the market. I absolutely adore the car, but it's definitely not without its warts. One of which being it's just too fast. It's just too fast. You can't. 505 horsepower in a car the size of a Honda Civic. It's over before you even start to have fun.
So what is the optimum level? You've talked about this, I think. What is the optimum speed for a car?
6 seconds to 60. 5.
6. 5s.
High fives. So hold on. Let's say, I think that really depends on where you live. I think it very much depends on where you live, because in Oklahoma or Michigan, roads where states or places geography with big, huge open spaces and very wide roads, and where people tend to travel very quickly, 6-second cars feel really, really slow. In Europe, for example, 6-second cars, unless they're diesels or turbocharged, feel slow because everyone really accelerates hard. In the San Francisco Bay Area, our roads are tight and small and narrow, and everyone drives really slowly, so a 6-second car can feel quick. What's your thought on this? You've been quiet.
I don't know. It's nice to have the ability to do that, but I don't use it very often. I think I care less about how quickly the car accelerates and more quickly about the sort of the character of the experience while it's happening. Like the GT3 is very fast. It is too fast, especially because if you want to visit Redline in more than 2 consecutive gears, then you will be going very, very fast. And so that part I don't like about it. Also part of that, I'm sure, is because the car is rear-wheel drive and they want it to have traction, because if you put really short gear ratios in that car, I think that it would just constantly be what?
Compare the gear ratios of your 6-speed manual to a 7-speed PDK. So the PDK gets really short. So, for example, they didn't do a full car and driver test. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the PDK, part of the reason why the PDK cars are so much quicker from 0 to 60 is they use much shorter gear ratios, and it's because they can be in third gear by 65 miles an hour without an interruption in power, where a manual will necessarily be slower if you have multiple shifts. So it's not actually a rear wheel traction issue on something like your GT3.
Yeah, I guess because it's rear engined. Yeah. But what I was saying, I guess, is that they sort of the experience that you have, and so if it's an interesting enough experience, then I don't mind it being fast, and it's nice to have when you need it. Like if you're on the Autobahn, like it's really nice to have a fast car. It really helps things, because when you're going 140 miles an hour, then like it's useful to have 500-600 horsepower, and a car with 250 is not going to be that helpful on the Autobahn when you're trying to accelerate. But that's obviously an outside case. I guess like we often refer to, it's about the experience that you have along the way. And so like a vintage car can feel really just like you're having an absolute blast with 300 or 400 horsepower, which is a lot for a vintage car, then that is like a hell of an experience. And even if that car is a 5 or high 4s car, it feels just outrageously fast compared to a contemporary car that does 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds, where it's just, you're going it's so effortless and it happens so quickly that you don't have time to process, and that there's all these other cars in the way, and that you spend all of your time being frustrated by the fact that there's all these other cars in the way, instead of having a joyful experience of enjoying what the car is and what it can do and how it makes you feel and all this information that it's telling you. I like information.
Yeah.
Right? When you get a modern car that doesn't give you any information, it just like physically assaults you and nothing else, then that's not...
I would say the same goes for dates too. If you just get physically assaulted and nothing else,
and you don't have a good experience, you don't get any information.
No one wants to go have dinner and be physically assaulted. But you bring up a really good point with the Autobahn thing. So have you driven a lot on? I assume maybe you go to Europe quite a bit. You spend a lot of time on Autobahns in slow and fast cars.
Yes. Does a 3-cylinder Ford Focus count as a slow car?
Depends. Turbo?
I think it might have been turbocharged.
So EcoBoost 123 horsepower. So it probably did, what was it, Focus, you said?
Yes, it was a Focus.
So it did like 125, 130 miles an hour?
I don't know. I sort of didn't really go a whole lot past 180, 190K.
Okay. Okay, and then have you been in something outrageously fast?
The GT3, an M6 and a GT3 are the most Autobahn minutes, hours that I have in fast cars.
I've spent a ton of time on the Autobahn, and I don't actually love really, really fast cars. It's fun for a little while, but really fast cars, it's either one of two things. Either they have 100 or 250 kilometer an hour limiter, or some sort of 260, 250, somewhere in there, 155. Basically, most cars in Europe are limited to 155 miles an hour. Some of the driver pack Mercedes will be 170 something or 186. But so either they're limited to 250 and it's fun to slam into that limiter. I mean, some cars hit that, like the V12 Mercedes stuff, hit that limiter so hard that you think you just hit the car in front of you. I mean, they're just they're pulling so hard when they hit that. Or the car does 300K, so like 186 miles an hour or and above. And I do not like traveling over 300K. I've hit 300 a couple times on Autobahn, and I don't think we should be traveling that quickly as humans. There's no, on the ground, shit just happens way too fast.
Especially if there's like a truck or something, or
closing speed, right? So the trucks in Europe are all limited to 100K. So you have the right lane, if you're on a 2-lane Autobahn, everyone in the right lane, the trucks are all doing 100. So you would be passing them with a 200 kilometer an hour, so 124 mile an hour closing speed. Now, they're legally not permitted to jump into the left lane. That's not going to happen. The trucks are not going to do that unless they're swerving to avoid something. But some little,
Nissan Micra.
Right, exactly.
Fiesta.
Sticking in between them. So Derek, in his rental Ford, is stuck in between two trucks, can't see you, comes out, and by the time he's merging out, you're all dead. Not that Derek, tam-scott would ever do such a thing, but it happens.
No, I personally would not, certainly not.
But even when there's no one around, 300 shit starts to get weird. I'll get up there and I'll be like at 280, 290, and I just think, what happens if I get a flat right now?
Yeah, I would say 250 is kind of the upper limit for joy.
I think there's a really
without,
good reason.
Without you're sweating and.
Oh, you're sweating at 250. It depends on the car.
Death grip.
Right.
Yeah,
it depends
really
on the car.
depends on the car.
250 is fast, so that's 156. Yeah. And there are, things still happen at those speeds, but the difference between 150 and 180, right? So 250K and
miles
300K,
per hour,
right, is a huge, huge difference. And I used to think, it's so stupid that all these cars are limited. I don't have a problem, for example, that Volvo is now limiting all of their cars to 112, which is 180K. I don't have a problem with that. I think we're done. We don't need to go any faster than that. If Volvo is genuinely trying to stop people from dying in their cars, no one is going to be saved in an accident at 186 miles an hour. So stop it from happening in the first place. But the interesting thing about slow cars on the Autobahn is there's that challenge of, oh shit, I have to.
I know exactly what you're going to say right now.
I've had to scrub off 7 miles an hour because of this stupid tourist in a Ford 3-cylinder Focus in front of me.
Now it's going to take me 12 minutes to regain that.
Exactly.
Or maybe there'll be a downhill.
Right, and then, so sitting in a car's limiter to me is the most boring thing in the world. You're just, it's your foot is on the floor, the car, like a Mercedes S-Class at 250, the car is asleep, you're asleep. It is actually sad that you can be traveling at that rate of speed and have the car be that
under stressed.
Right.
Yeah.
You go and do like 200K an hour in anything from the 80s. And the 80s was a quantum leap over the 70s, which was a quantum leap over the 60s and whatever. 125 miles an hour in anything from the 80s, including an S-Class, is a big deal. Like, you're now guaranteed somewhere over 5,000 RPM. Not guaranteed, but, in almost all cases. And so, like, when I bought my 2.316 in Germany, it was on older tires, so I didn't really want to do anything too crazy. So I maxed it out. And
I was just thinking, I was like, I know whenever Jason says we're going on some twisty road, I'm not going to go too fast. Yeah. You always see red, and then it's just like all bets are off and you're going 11 fifths.
I like your fractions. That car passed TÜV, which is German inspection, right before I bought it, and the tires. So the tires I knew were okay. They had just passed a very comprehensive, a visual inspection and a brake system inspection, all the amazing stuff they do for German inspections. That's another episode in itself. But the car it's advertised 143 miles an hour, so 230K, I think it was. And of course, while it's sitting there, I'm sitting with an iPhone, not looking, going ting, 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 and take 200 pictures, one of which was clear. But that car was, an all-new car for 1982, the Mercedes W201, and it was on top of the world as far as refinement and engineering for a compact luxury sedan. At 120, it was fine, absolutely fine. At 130, I have my notes from that. At 130, shit started to get really loud, like really loud, like. To the point
I noticed that in my 500e also. Above 120, the wind noise makes it difficult to have a conversation. But it's actually otherwise
That was
fine.
when you were driving it in Mexico on that unlimited stretch of Mexican Autobahn, right?
Yes.
Careful. Yeah,
Autobahn.
It's really strange at 130. So it was like right at 200, 210 kilometers an hour, so 130 miles an hour. It started to get really loud. And by the time I was in the 140s, holy shit. I mean, engines at 6,200, I think it was at, which is its horsepower peak at top speed. It's screaming. And the noise and just, there was no vibration. I mean, the car was, set up for this, but oh my God. I think there's something really good about that. Because you know what I did is I slowed right the fuck down. Like this was not going to be my cruising speed.
Well, and you're thinking about all the wear on the engine also, and the people are like, oh, I'm not going to buy a car. In Europe, people are like, I'm not going to buy a German market car because it will have been VMAXed a great deal in its life and how much worn out.
I wasn't really thinking about that. Like it's a Cosworth head. The head's good for 10,000 RPM. It's a Mercedes block. I'm sure it's, those engines are good for 200,000. What I was thinking of is, what if something goes wrong? What if did I tighten that lug nut? Is there the tiniest little issue when you're being assaulted with things that loud? It makes you start to think. And so, like the other thing I did was I shipped my Scirocco over to Germany, and I spent 10 days. It was supposed to be 10 days in Germany with a vacation with my car, and all I wanted to do was max it out. And so the Scirocco's original top speed was somewhere around 100 miles an hour for the fastest versions. And as it got more powerful, the 16 valve came out and did 120 from the factory. 124 in European spec. So the car was designed for 124. I, of course, put an engine in it with 50% more horsepower. Math said the car would do 135. Car did 135. That thing at 135 was probably the most frightening car I've ever driven at those speeds. I mean, I at one point I was drafting another car. I was behind him. We hit 150 down this huge hill, and I'm a foot and a half off its bumpers. My friend and one on the phone on Bluetooth together. Not that he could hear me or I could hear him, but we were screaming at each other. And I ducked out from behind his draft, and the sunroof blew up, and the window blew out of its frame, and I somehow didn't break anything and didn't die. Horrifying experience. Absolutely horrifying.
Like I said, 11/5.
Well, I had to do it. I mean, I had this one shot. But you know, and this is another thing. Before that car went, I did a full bolt check. I did a full engineering check. And then I did something unusual for me is I brought it to a friend and said, look, I'm a friend of mine who's a race steward and a really great mechanic. And said, hey, do me a favor and go over this car and make sure you find nothing dangerous. And this is before I sent it over because, you know, this is an American market car. It's not had an inspection in, you know, its whole life. But so I'm over there, and what I realized is I could max that thing out, and I maxed it out for hours on it. I mean, I put 1,100 miles on that car in a couple days, most of which was at VMAX. But I'd be sitting there and just kind of thinking, and looking in the middle of nowhere, and no one around and whatever. And the thought would pop into my head of like, fuck, what happens if the power steering belt pops off? I won't have power steering. If I get into a skid, and the thought of that, I would look down and I will have lost 10 miles an hour. You know, my foot unconsciously would just come off the gas. And then I'd be like, okay, and then eventually creep my way back up to VMAX and then think, what if the windshield blows in? Because it's like a floating windshield. It's not even glued or adhered in. It's just sitting there in a rubber seal, which is 30-something years old. And if it cracks, I get hit in the face with a windshield doing 130. Oh, look down, I'm back down to 116, right? So there's this like self-preservation thing that kicks in that doesn't happen when you're sitting on a limiter in a really fast car. And I can imagine something like a Pista or something like that M8 competition. I haven't driven that particular car, but plenty of new, modern, really fast M cars are asleep at 135 miles an hour. They're at 2,700 RPM, eighth throttle. They don't care. And yet the dangers are still all there. Right? Obviously, they're a safer car, but you just don't want to be in an accident at 130 miles an hour. And all of that leads me back to, what are we chasing? Why are we chasing all of this ridiculous speed? I don't understand it.
Here's my hot take, which is not going to be very complimentary to human beings, but manufacturers are seeking sales, and there's an element of, we talked about this about the Veyron, right? Why did they build the Veyron? Why did it go so fast? They built it to see if it was possible. I think there's an element, if you leave engineers alone, and there's this ethical question relating to engineering, which is that just because we can, should we? And like they'll always ask this about the scientists who developed the nuclear bomb, right? Like they were like, the scientist's perspective, or one perspective that scientists will have, is like, we give you a powerful engine, science, and you steer the ship, leaders, whoever the leaders are. And I don't know that that's like an appropriate way for people who are making these things to approach them, because I don't think that leadership truly understands what's possible until they see it firsthand. If you're using the example of the nuclear bomb, right? Mm-hmm. Just like, oh, it's a very powerful bomb and it's World War II, so that, you know, leaders are going to be like, oh, we need that for sure. Only the scientists truly comprehend what they're creating at that point when it's so hypothetical. Mm-hmm. This is very tangential. What I'm trying to say is that there's an element of humans doing stuff because they want to see what's possible, and they will try it and make it, and to see what they can do, whether it's going to the moon or making atomic weapons or whatever. And this happens with cars. And so, of course, if it's possible, someone's going to do it, and consumers go on the basis of like, they look at the numbers and they're like, wow, that's so fast, that's amazing, I've got to have that, and everybody gets sucked into it, and so manufacturers are incentivized to do it because they'll sell products to people who are like, oh, that seems cool, I need that or want that, and so you get into this like non-virtuous cycle, which ends up with things being really fast, and so like, I don't know, here we are. And some people, or like a lot of people, enough people buy it for the process to continue. And it remains shockingly like kind of legal, which you would think that at some point with the complaints that people make about like the Department of Transportation and everything, that they would make it illegal to make a car faster than a certain threshold. And to some extent that's like, oh, a libertarianism victory, because we don't have any restrictions on how fast cars can go, which is, you know, if you think about it, that's kind of charming that exists. Just like it's charming that motorcycles exist, even though obviously like the idea of putting something with two wheels that is 220 degrees Fahrenheit and full of flammable liquid between your legs and going 180 miles an hour on it is like obviously unsafe, but it's still allowed. So like I guess it's nice that it exists, but also by the same token, like it's kind of irresponsible, and it's one of those risks where we're just like, no, I don't know, people seem to die in motoring, but the benefits are worth the cost.
But what we haven't done is, while cars have gotten faster and faster and faster and faster, our speed limits and our tolerance for speed has not.
I've noticed that. I think about that often because I think about like, wow, so the speed limit of 65 miles an hour from, which existed in 1970, you think about 65 miles an hour now in a car versus 65 miles an hour back then. Like you drive an old car at 65 and you're like, wow, it's a very sporty speed. Yeah, like the non-trivial risk of death at any moment. And even like in a sort of moderately performant, like a regular American car from like that era.
They couldn't cruise at 80. Like there were a lot of American cars in the 70s that could not do 80 on an extended basis without overheating.
Yeah.
Like,
so did you mention the General Motors and Honda thing? CVVC motor?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I just started reading this book and I got the full story on that. Fascinating. But anyway, the reason why in the 70s we couldn't go very fast is because nobody could figure out how to make cars that would meet emission standards and also make horsepower at the same time. That was an actual tangent.
That was almost a Camisa-esque tangent. It was so bad.
So speed limits, yes, have not gotten higher. And I was thinking about like, well, I don't know. Then you see the way that a lot of people operate their cars and the amount of attention that they're paying, which is often minimal.
Right.
And also, but the other thing is like stopping performance has also improved dramatically. And so like, but the fact of the matter is that 80 miles an hour, you cover a certain number of feet and there's a certain amount of time you have to react. And so I guess maybe that's the driver, but I don't think there's a really strong impetus, like what is the political angle for increasing the speed limit in the United States?
There is
given
none,
the level
there's
of
none even in Germany. The political angle is to reduce the speed everywhere on Earth. It's just slow traffic down.
Have we talked about the ADAC in Germany and the role that it occupies? Because I think that is just beyond cool, which is so German. Which is that I think one of my friends who lives in Stuttgart said to me, basically the ADAC is the equivalent of the NRA there. But instead of advocating for rights for guns, they're advocating for like preserving the lack of speed limits. And it's a really powerful lobby because of the power of automakers in Germany. And I was just thinking about like, that's so cool that the role that is occupied by guns here is occupied in Germany by automakers. And so instead of advocating for Second Amendment rights for people to own firearms, they're advocating for like continuing to preserve no speed limits in the one place left that doesn't have them anymore.
And I should also say that the ADAC is basically the German AAA. I mean, it's the Allgemeine Deutsche Automobilclub, the general German car club, basically. And they, that's who you call when you break down on the side of the road and you're looking for a tow truck. And they do, driver's license services and stuff like that also to a small extent. But yes, they have been pushed. There has been a fight that's been going on for decades now between the Green Party and a lot of lobbyists in the automotive industry those lobbyists make a really good point. The reason why German cars have been technologically superior to most other cars in most situations is probably due to the fact that they are driven at top speed regularly at home. And
so their standard of care for what an automobile needs to be able to do. Like, I'm bringing up David E. Davis again, but there's this video he does about the Porsche 911, and there was a promo video for Porsche, and the thing he says at the very beginning is he says, it is the engineer working on this car knows that this car will undoubtedly be driven as fast as it will possibly go for the entire duration of a tank of gas. As Americans, we have a hard time imagining a car that would even survive that, yet with a Porsche, it's just a basic given.
Right.
And I think that's true about German cars generally, is that whatever it is, it's going to go as fast as it will go for the entire duration of a tank of gas, and it needs to be able to survive that. And that is exactly what you just said about the sort of
Here's the
reason
best
why.
example I can do. So we moved to Germany, my family and I, when I was 15 years old, and the first time I was ever in a car, on an Autobahn was my dad had an Opel Omega wagon, and it was the big 2-liter. It was the first one we had. We had a 2.4 later on, but it was the 2-liter 8-valve, which was considered a big engine for this big car. And we were on the Autobahn, and I remember I was writing a note to this was before the internet or anything, before electricity, basically, writing a note to my buddy at home. I'm like, oh my God, my dad is cruising at 160 kilometers an hour. Like, this is crazy. That's 100 miles an hour. Like this, and it feels like nothing or whatever. But actually the craziest thing to me was that he was at 5,700 RPM. So he was like at I think the car did 170 flat out, which was at like 6,100 RPM. And it wasn't so much the ability to cruise all day at these speeds that was shocking. And you couldn't really cruise all day. I mean, you could, but there's still traffic, obviously. But we could be hours on end at 6,000 RPM. And that was the shock to me. Like, what? These engines survive this. And that temperature gauge never moved. And nothing mattered. It was just, hours on end, full load, full throttle, full revs. And then my buddy's mom got an E36 318i when the E36 first came out. And it had, forgive me if I don't remember the numbers exactly, I think it was a 6,000 RPM is where the red line went like half red, and 6,500. There was 500, I think. 500 later, it went full red. And it would do 205 kilometers an hour, I remember that, at one hair below the solid red. And if you hit the solid red, it would kick you back down to like 196 or 197, all the way out of the red, and you'd have to slowly climb all the way back up. And we took that car to Paris, I think, for the weekend once, my friend and I. And I realized it was 5 hours of that engine being in the red line for 5 hours straight. Of course, obviously, the car doesn't give a shit. Nothing happens. Nothing's wrong with it.
Well, you should see it now.
I'm sure the motor lasted 100K. But there's the flip side of this story was the graduation year, graduate from high school, he and I decide we're going to do a big trip around the United States. We can't rent a car because we're too young. So my grandmother gives us her 1987 Chevy Cavalier. And this is 93. So the car is not old, 6 years old. And it had like 49 or 50,000 miles on it. So we took her Cavalier and we gave her the money to rent herself a car to drive while we were going. We're going to do this big 6,000 mile drive. And her Cavalier lasted precisely 3 hours with Garrett behind the wheel. This is my high school best friend. He was matted up this hill, and it was a 3-speed automatic, and he locked it down in second because it would want to shift into third, and there was no tachometer. And so in second, up this huge hill, it would do like 74 or something, and in third, it would only do like 68. So we're just up this hill, engine screaming, and I just kept saying to him, like, relax. Like, let it go into third and just give it full. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, whatever. It's got 50,000 miles on. Nothing's going to happen. And we started bickering back and forth. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this thing's got to last us 6,000 miles. He's like, it's a couple years old. Bang! Bang, 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 bang. Spun a rod. Slight disaster because we are now 3 hours. So we're like 120 miles into, I don't even think we're that far, into a 6,000 mile drive, which was of course canceled and fucked. And the car needed a new engine, and thank God GM covered it, because what are we going to do? I was 17 years old. I couldn't afford to buy my grandmother a new engine. But that is the difference between even late 80s, that was in 87, late 80s American cars versus German cars. His mom's car lasted probably 100,000 miles in the red line at full throttle, and my grandmother's car made it 3 hours.
But what about the Pontiac endurance test?
No. See, you know too much and you remember too much. That was an impressive showing. So that was with a different friend. I can't believe you just brought this up. So a friend of mine had a.
It's not too late to not tell the story.
It's just it paints me in a bad picture. So my buddy Mike,
unlike most of the other things which unfold in front of the camera.
I never abuse cars unless they're rental cars, in which case all bets are off. This was a very funny story that Mike is gone now. So this is my best friend who passed away a couple years ago. And he had to drive to, We both lived in South Florida, and we had to drive to, I think it was Jacksonville, to pick up, you'll appreciate this, a A124. So a 300E coupe, convertible, sorry. So 124 convertible that was red with tan interior for one of his clients. Like he was brokering cars when we were in college. And so we decided the easiest and cheapest way for us to get there was to go rent a car. So we go to the car rental place, and the thing about Mike was he was always so bad. Like he was just badly behaved in all the funniest ways. And I would get angry with him and tell him to like knock it off. And the problem was that I'd be so hysterical laughing that I'd be saying one thing, but my actions are saying completely opposite. Like I'm just egging him on. So we go to this poor rental car place at like the Palm Beach airport. And he was like, yeah, I don't drive American cars. I'm sorry. And they were like, what? And he was like, yeah, sorry, I'm not taking that. They wanted to give him a Buick Skylark with a thing with a pointy front end on it. And he was like, yeah, sorry, I just don't do American cars. How about that Altima that you guys have in the back? And they're like, that's a different class of car. And he's like, fine, I'll take it. And they're like, no, but it's like, there's nothing available. Your choice is this Buick, and that's it. And he was like, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm not driving a Buick. And they, like, of course now I'm like trying not to laugh because I know he's just being an asshole. And the guy behind the counter is like completely confused. Like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, so why isn't he driving an American car? Long story short, Mike is like, I warned you. I told you. And he's like, let's go. And he's all mad. And we walk out. It's dark outside. This was the night before we were leaving. And we walk out to the lot, and I'm like, let it go. Just doesn't matter. It's just getting us a 5-hour drive. Who cares? And he was like, told you, I'm not driving this car. And I will never forget as long as I live. We walk over to the car. He pops open the hood, and he puts his fucking foot up on something and starts pulling on a wire. And he was like, I'm not driving this fucking car. And pulls the wire out, throws it, slams the hood closed. And he was like, I told you, the fucking thing's not going anywhere. And he gets in the car, and the thing starts right up. He was like, damn it. And now I am tears pouring down my face. Like the whole thing was like a cartoon character with his leg up on the thing. Like, so he opens the fuse, like rips the fuse block door, and he's pissed. Like he's like, I'm encouraging him because I'm now inconsolably hysterical laughing, but he's getting madder by the minute. So he starts pulling relays, and the thing dies. And he was like, ha! He's starting, it's cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking. And I'm now like, I can't stand up. He's just cranking and cranking and cranking. And he cranks until the battery's dead. He just lets the thing die. Just wow, 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 wow. Click, 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 click. And he lets go. He's like, walks in and he throws the keys on the thing and he goes, is there some way to start this car that I don't know? And the guy's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I turn the key, it won't start. And the guy's like, what? He follows us out and it goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Click, 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 click. And he was like, oh, dead battery. And he's like, how about that Altima? And the guy's like, you're not getting the Altima. So I'm now like trying to hide the fact that I'm hysterical laughing at this whole thing. Can't believe he's done this. And so I wind up leaving the office because I gotta like stop laughing. And the guy comes out with keys to a Pontiac. And it was whatever the Pontiac Sunfire, it was the Cavalier.
Sunfire.
It was the Cavalier that wasn't Cavalier. Red coupe. And Mike was like, fine, whatever. And Mike goes and gets in the Altima and drives out. Like, you know, like we have to show the paperwork. And next thing I see him backing up, I'm like, I refuse to get in the car with him. I'm like, this is like out of my league. I can't do this anymore. And I'm walking. I was walking back to go get, like he drove me there in another car. So we had another car at the parking lot. And I see him hop in this Altima and I'm like, you idiot. So then he gets in the Pontiac and he peels out and meet him back at his house. And he's like, I am destroying this fucking car. It's what they get, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, haha, let it go. Well, the next morning we get up and we have a long way to go. And we are along this road with nothing around except for a ditch with like a swamp on the side of the road. And he was like, he just got this look on his face and he's like, I got it. We're going to do the Pontiac endurance test. And I was like, what? He was like, we're going to call it the PET. And he slams on the brakes and just out of nowhere scares the shit out of me and just does a full ABS stop. And then he does like 0 to 100 and then a full ABS stop. And so he does probably 30 consecutive 0 to 100 zeros, and he's like, wow, look at the brakes. They're on fire, but they're still working. So that turns into like me, of course, completely hysterical laughing. And then we're doing like 40, and he's like, I wonder what I would do if I throw it in reverse. And I'm like, don't. And before I could even say don't, it's tick, right? And we're in the middle of nowhere. Like there are no people, there are no other cars. Like there was an occasional alligator on the side of the road. And I'm like, great, we're gonna walk home and like get killed by an alligator. Motherfucker threw the car in reverse at like 50 miles an hour. And it just clunked and died immediately, just stalled. And he was like, oh, that sucks. And he does it again, starts it, throws it in drive, gets us back up to like 30 miles an hour and throws it in reverse, and it just dies again. And I'm like, hold on. By the way, I should also say, at this point, I'm 18 years old. Like he must have been 19, I was 18. So I'm a child. I do not condone this activity. So I'm like, just floor it at the same time you throw it in reverse, because then it won't stall so fast. And he was like, oh my God. This poor thing went right into reverse and just sat there at like 1600 RPM. Just, and as we do this perfectly linear stop from 60 miles an hour, or however fast we're going, to 0. And just, and take off in reverse. I love how you're still laughing about this. Like, you've heard this story from me like 10 years ago. So, of course, this perfect linear stop. And then he gets the limiter in reverse. And now we're going down. And he was like, and he just throws it in drive. So it just from like 30 miles an hour in reverse. And it starts laying tire. So now we're going backwards, laying tire, and then forward to 30 miles an hour. He looks at me and just goes back into reverse. And back. We did this, I cannot tell you how many times. 30? The fucking thing wouldn't break. And I'm now, I mean, as hysterical as obviously you can imagine I was, but I'm like, stop it, we're gonna die. Like, you're gonna lose control, we're gonna wind up in the friggin' alligator swamp. Like, whatever, car would not die. So that was the...
Whereas if you do that in a neon, apparently it causes instantaneous...
I don't remember everything, stop it. That was okay. 3 weeks later, he did that to me in a neon. I was in a neon loaner car because my Corolla was currently being lemon-lawed. And he was like, let me throw it in reverse. And I'm like, no, Chrysler transmission, don't do that. And before, like, as soon as I turned around, I was looking, whatever, we were like 20 miles an hour, threw it in reverse, and the transmission exploded. It was just horrible grinding sound. That was it. Tow truck, ride home. But that pet, the Pontiac Endurance test, let me tell you, that fucking transmission was amazing. Amazing. These are the days before computer controls will stop you from actually, like, they'll just ignore the request to throw it in reverse. But GM trannies were indestructible in the 80s and 90s. Absolutely indestructible.
Even if the rest of the car wasn't.
I gotta tell you, that car...
Well, the Cavalier's motor.
The Cavalier's motor popped. But like, my buddy Jay's mom also had an 87 Cavalier. And I just wrote my column recently about this in Road and Track, because it was a column about Speedos. But the coolest thing about that 87 Cavalier was that the Speedo was an 85 mile an hour Speedo and didn't have a stopper, so we could wrap it around. And Jay's best burnout ever was like this huge e-brake handle, pulled up the e-brake handle, and it didn't have a rev limiter. The car just revved as fast as it could go. It was a push rod, 2-liter 4-cylinder. And he would just sit there at a red light, just staring at the car next to him, like with his hand up, like, what's up? And just, whoa! And the light would turn green. He would just go, right down into drive. And this one day he pulled the e-brake up, and I think the road was wet. And it would go, wah, to 45 miles an hour, which was red line in first. And then, wah, which was red line in second at 75. And then shifted into third, and he hit 0. And I was like, that is fucking amazing. Like, we hit 0, and we weren't even moving yet. And I think we calculated that out. At the time, we thought it was 105. And when I was fact-checking my column, it looks like the wheels were actually at 115. But more importantly, that Cavalier made it 70,000 miles of all of his shit. And he neutral dropped that car probably 4 times a day. I mean, it was just, we clocked it once. It was like 12 and a half seconds if you just floored it from 0 to 60. It was like 11.1 if you brake torqued it, and 9 point something if you neutral dropped it. So we would just be like...
And what did the magazines say? Which number did the magazines give?
10.9 or something. I mean, it was like, he was way faster. And I always thought, why did it never occur to car and driver to place the gear selector in neutral and just hold your foot on the gas until the engine stops going any faster and just be like, into drive. That poor car. That blew a head gasket and overheated at like 70,000 miles or something. But the transmission never died. Never cared. Neutral drops everywhere we went. Didn't give a fuck. GM stuff was amazing back then. Transmission.
Certain transmissions. Yeah,
the push rod motor. Just you can't rev an engine to its limit, like a push rod motor, to as fast as it will rev without a limiter on it, and hold it there ad nauseum. It will explode, as both Garrett and Jason proved over the years. Mm-hmm. But Pontiac Endurance says, "Man, I wish back in the day we had video cameras and like iPhones for that reason, because I want to hear the hysteria of laughter of that whole scene. I mean, I replay it in my head, and it's the most hilarious thing in the world.
Maybe we need to go find one.
A Cavalier?
Yeah, or Sundance.
Pontiac? Yeah. I mean, what's the worst it could cost us? $200? Plus, we'll get half of that back from the junkyard when we junk it.
Okay, so that was the moral of the story. I think we started with the Pista, and we finished with the Sundance.
Because here's the difference. No one will ever do that to a Pista. Ever. First of all, if you tried to do an endurance test like
good?
You would die. You would lose your, meaning every cop would shoot you. You can't do that kind of shit in fast cars. Also, people have way too much sympathy, mechanical sympathy, for something as special as a Ferrari Pista. Or Ferrari anything.
So this is like the ideal two-car solution. There's an Instagram account called like two-car solution or something like that, and it'd be like an interesting pair of cars where like, oh, that's an interesting solution for two cars, where it'll be like, I don't know, an E63 wagon and a GT3 Touring, or like a, I don't know, just some weird pairing where you're like, no, that could make sense, like a Jeep Grand Wagoneer and like a Miata or something, both from 1990.
So
anyway,
a Pista and a rental car.
A Pista and a Sunfire.
Well, any sort of rental car for which you have purchased full coverage.
Yes, as long as it's not a neon. It can't have the Chrysler transmission, because you don't get any joy out of that if the transmission immediately fails.
Tow truck rides suck, even if it's rental cars. I was in 2 different neons that died the same death with transmissions. That's what Toyota gets for giving me a Dodge Neon. I was paying a lease on a Corolla, and they kept giving me Neon.
Oh yes, didn't you subsequently do? Never mind.
Hold on. What's the statute of limitations?
Never mind.
We can't do that. I mean, I purposefully killed a Neon, so I can admit this. This is 1994, so we're talking 26 years ago. I lemon lawed my Corolla because it had a whole bunch of weird problems. The guys from Toyota came down to observe the car. They test drove it and crashed it when the powertrain fell out, because we determined afterwards, 3 of the 4 bolts holding the subframe were gone, and the 4th one broke while they were driving it. The loose subframe was actually the source of all the problems, and they never figured out. That
until it was crashed.
Until it was crashed. That in and of itself is nuts, and I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. However, after that incident, that accident, whatever, when they fired the tech and all the other crap I had to go through, they were like, okay, so we're going to put you in a rental car. And I'm like, here we go again. I had been driving Neons forever, and I told them, no more Neons, I'm done. And they were like, well, you're not 21 yet, so we can't give you a rental car. We have to give you something from off of our own fleet, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm telling you give me a Neon, I'm killing it. And this was probably 6 months after the Neon incident where Mike killed the other Neon rental loaner car that I had. And I just walked, and I'm like, how about that LS400 that you have sitting on the used car lot? Like, I'm done here. Like, the conversation's over. I had 49 trips, I should say, to the Toyota dealership before this whole thing happened. I didn't file lemon law until 46 trips because I was an 18-year-old kid and I didn't know any better. And finally I filed, and they were like, what the fuck is going on with this stack of papers like this? And I'm like, I'm not driving a fucking Neon. because it's going to take you months to fix this car. And they're like, we're not fixing your car. We're going to give you your money back. I'm like, the fucking hell you are. I'm not taking a 95 Corolla. They lost 5 horsepower and they got shitty cloth. No, you're fixing my car. So I knew it was going to be out of commission for like 2 months, which it was. And so they were like, you're getting a Neon, and that's all there is to it. I'm like, okay. So I walked over, started it, revved it, threw it in reverse. It exploded immediately. And I walked back. I'm like, I think it's leaking transmission fluid. And I dropped the key on the desk. It gave me a Mustang. Which, by the way, was this was the first year, so this would have been 95? It was the first
year of the blobby one.
Of the blobby one, which had it was a convertible. It was like shaky, the shaky
cowl shake.
Right. But it had a non-computer controlled automatic. So guess what it did?
The Pontiac endurance test.
It also completely passed the test. It would, if you threw it in reverse, it would stall. But if you threw it in reverse and gave a little bit of gas, it would just start spitting the rears enough. And you could come to a perfectly controlled stop with the smoke pouring. Oh my God, I was such a terrible human being. I'm going to hell for all the rental car shit that I've done. But
this is why your Volkswagen motors keep failing, because your karma is coming back.
I just remember getting off like an on-ramp on the highway and just you just come to a complete stop and drag a little bit of brakes with the front to come to a stop, and everyone's staring at you, and you just look the top down in a Mustang convertible, looking around like, what's your problem? What are you looking at? Oh my God. Don't ever give a rental car to 18-year-old Jason. That's the...
18-year-old Jason's gone. No, he's not. Yeah, I know. We'll call you 11/5.
I can't. I mean, as much as I would really genuinely love to do shit like this, I can't do that anymore. I mean,
you've never done it to a press car.
Nothing of that sort. I mean, the thing is, and I say this without joking around. All of the stuff that I do to press cars is done for a reason. I mean, I'm never being... Seriously?
How about the GLB?
I jumped a Mercedes for editorial purposes. That's editorial purpose. I made content out of that.
Okay.
And that wasn't really abusive. Did it even hit hard? No. It's a spot in the city of San Francisco, in Mexico, the other San Francisco, where crimes are not prosecutable, that there's a jump, and I cleared the whole intersection because it's Mexico. They're small intersections.
Keep going, keep going. Yep, we're good, we're good, we're good.
But whatever, it didn't even bottom out. I mean, and by bottom out, I don't mean like body on the ground. I mean suspension bottom out. It's just a spot where the hill goes up and then it levels off and it goes up again. So you can just whoop, boop, boop. But I don't abuse. I mean, have you ever seen me doing like gratuitous burnouts in rental cars?
It depends on how you define gratuitous.
If it's for the camera, look, I do gratuitous burnouts in my own cars for sure. Although technically, if they're for Instagram, is it gratuitous? Technically, it's for business purpose. But yeah, press cars are there for the evaluation of vehicles. And the reality is, it doesn't actually. This is fucked up. It doesn't really matter what the next person thinks of your Nissan Altima rental car. It does matter what the next journalist thinks of your Nissan Altima press car, right? So if I go and I beat the shit out of a car and I damage it and I destroy it and it no longer drives the same way, I have now cost the company who owns that car, the manufacturer of that car, potentially millions of dollars in lost revenue, right? So maybe the next person who gets it is Motor Trend, and they go and do a test and they're like, this is the worst driving car in the world, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not fair. So I will not.
You've come across press cars that have previously had that kind of abuse, and you're like, oh, this is not representative.
There's abuse, and then there's testing, right? So for example, when I lived in Ann Arbor at Automobile, we always knew if we got a V6 Nissan that had been tested by Car and Driver, because Car and Driver was the only other magazine in town, and they were the only ones doing instrumented tests other than us. You knew immediately if Car and Driver had the thing, because the front motor mount was fucked. I mean, the car would just do this horrible clunk. And apparently the press fleet guys didn't realize that if Car and Driver tested it, they were going to break a front motor mount, and therefore that mount needed to be replaced. But Yeah, I mean, that's testing. Like, you got to get a good number. You like, if the car breaks. But like, that's part of the deal. Car companies, do things like put launch control in these cars to get 2.5 second 0 to 60s out of their cars, and they want us to get the good numbers. But I'm never gonna. You're not gonna see me do clutch dump burnout. I'm not gonna glaze brakes. I'm not gonna hit shit on purpose. Would never throw. A car in reverse repeatedly.
A press car.
A press car. I mean, the computers took all the fun out of it. None of the modern cars do this shit anyway. Like, I throw my e-Golf in reverse all the time because it turns the reverse lights on. And if somebody's on my ass, like if they're really tailgating me, I'm not going to brake check them. That's like a real dick move. But flash the brake lights at them and they're like, what the? Oh, I should back off. Like, it just gets their attention. But the car doesn't actually do anything. It just ignores my request to do something.
Yeah, because it's all electric anyway.
Right. Yeah. But I think what we've determined is that you and I need to go buy, judging from the mezzo-sopranoness of your laugh, the likes of which I don't think I've ever heard before. I don't think I've ever
Except
heard
for
you
the
laugh.
last time you told that story. The one other time I've heard it.
Yeah, you were basically inconsolable for 3 days afterwards. But I think we need to go get a car and destroy it. Like something that deserves to die, like a Sunfire or a Cavalier. And just examine just how many times
We
you can
can't
throw
drive on the Autobahn, so...
No, we might
as
as well
Americans,
just go do
we're not
stupid
allowed
shit.
to. So
We
we'll do the
might
next
as well.
best thing. The
Destroy
Pontiac
something!
Autobahn.
I mean, I have a lot of roadside assistance. You, I'm sure, have a lot of roadside assistance. So no matter where we do this, we'll get it to a junkyard somewhere. And I mean, I'm sorry, those kind of laughs are worth like $200.
It's $100 a head.
Yeah.
So what was this episode about?
I don't know.
Slow car fast versus fast car slow?
No, it wasn't slow car fast. It was
Cheap
fast
car broken?
blow.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you blow shit up? You're the one that made me tell all these terrible stories about my best friend. May he rest in peace.
Yes.
Thank God. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Thank God. Thank God. The one good thing about him no longer being on this planet is I no longer have to worry about the phone call. Can you bail me out? I only got one of them from him, and I don't have to worry about another one. But he was genuinely had a criminal mind. He was who would think of saying to somebody, "I'm not going to drive that car at a rental car lot," and then destroy it so that he couldn't. That's obviously where I got the idea for the Neon. I'm done. I meant it. I'm not driving another Neon. He was just being silly. And no, and I did not. Did not. Those cars were fun though. They were fast. 132 horsepower 2-liter, or the 150 horsepower twin cam. One of my lucky rental experiences, I got the double overhead cam. It's a lot of 150 horsepower was a lot in that segment.
Didn't you somehow lock up the brakes on one of those from thermal cycling?
No, that was my buddy Scott's brother. He took one on a track day and overheated the brakes. And rather than do what you are supposed to do, which was to cool it off by driving it around slowly, he just
without using the brakes.
Yeah. He just stopped it and turned it off with the brakes on fire. And then the pads welded themselves to the rotors, and the car was immobile. So he would just put it in gear and it would just go. And then finally we hit it with another car and that got it moving. I don't remember what it got hit with, but that was, I think, at the same track where I had a Lincoln LS, which was my favorite thing to rent from Hertz because there was a Hertz Prestige collection, and they had Lincoln LSs which did epic fucking burnouts and epic donuts and all kinds of other shit. And that was the first car I'd ever experienced with an electric parking brake. So I thought it was super fun to hold the electric parking brake on and floor it, and it would just sit at 4,000 RPM and just like with 20 miles an hour and drive around. And that parking brake caught on so much fire that the flames engulfed the gas filler neck and the filler thing. That was scary. That was when I was like, okay, no more. Like, I'm gonna die with my rental car abuse thing. It's disgusting. All of this is completely made up. You make me make these things up for comedy.
In conclusion, be nice to your Pista. Well, don't buy one.
That should be the title for this episode. We're always trying to figure out what should we call these episodes. Should it be nice to your Pista? Or should it be destroy your Pontiac? We already did the rental car abuse episode, and we covered a quarter of my stories because there are plenty other ones.
Yes, you left those out, it seems.
Well, we're running out of time. We're an hour and 13 minutes.
You're right. This is a very long episode. All
Speaking
right.
of running out of time, this is our second to last episode before summer break. We are going to take a couple, I don't even know, weeks, months, years off. I don't know. Weeks down. So the next episode will be our last one before the break. So we got to figure out what topic that's going to be. And it probably shouldn't be have
take a
Jason
survey.
incriminate.
We should take a survey or do a Q&A.
Oh, Q&A would do. Should we try to do one live? A live Q&A or just insert your comments in the Q&A? All right. Well, I will figure that. We'll make a pinned comment at the end on the YouTube version of this, if you're listening on a podcast. And we will either do a Q&A and answer all kinds of fun questions or just kind of go through the comments and make us read aloud all of the terrible things that people say about us. That's
all right.
Fun. Okay.
Sounds good.
So until next time, do me a favor and send me some links on Craigslist for shitty cars that we can go blow up.
Yes.
And,
it just needs to not have a computer-controlled transmission.
So yeah, hydraulic, automatic, that will do what we tell it to do, including self-destruct.
Yes. Ideally under $200.
Yes. I'm on board on that. And all of you guys like and subscribe and all that other stuff. Click the notification bell to hear about anytime we post anything new to the ISSIMI channel. And we will see you guys next week. And unless we're in jail. I'm waiting. Statute of limitations. I can talk about this shit now. It all happened in Mexico anyway. If you enjoyed the Carmudgeon Show, make sure you subscribe to the ISSIMI YouTube channel and click that notification bell to make sure you're told every time we publish something amazing, which is basically every time we publish anything. Are you done yet?